It's a small world from BBC Radio Scotland. Listen now on BBC Sounds.
9:22 now, Saturday's Good Morning Scotland with Fiona Stocker and Lucy White. We're going to head over to the US now. The election campaign wheels slowly beginning to turn as the Republican Party nominees start to drip in, and Nikki Haley is the second name in the hat.
Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of the last 8 presidential elections. That has to change. It's time for a new generation of leadership to rediscover fiscal responsibility, secure our border, and strengthen our country, our pride, and our purpose. China and Russia are on the march. They all think we can be bullied, kicked around. You should know this about me. I don't put up with bullies. And when you kick back, it hurts them more if you're wearing heels. I'm Nikki Haley, and I'm running for president.
Well, the former South Carolina governor and United Nations ambassador announced she'd run as a candidate to become president at the beginning of the week. So she's now running. We know that Donald Trump is running. Let's talk about this with Peter Chowka, who's a political analyst in the US, contributes to the American Thinker magazine. Good morning, Peter.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to join you today.
Well, thank you very much for joining us. Listening to that announcement then that she's running for president, she's really setting out her interests, isn't she? And they seem to chime with what would be called traditional Republican values.
Yeah, she is a conservative, Nikki Haley, and of course she has a lot going for her in her resume. She's the first woman to be elected the governor twice of the conservative state of South Carolina. And she brings what many people describe as an impressive resume. In addition to that, she served 2 years as the United States ambassador to the United Nations in the President Trump administration, which have provided her the foreign policy and diplomatic experience that she cites. And not least, she is a woman of color. Her parents, who are 2 professionals from India, moved to the United States in 1969, and Nikki Haley was born here 2 years later. She's the first woman of color and the first Asian American to run for the Republican presidential nomination. She likes to say that she was first here, first there, and maybe she'll be the first woman president. Who knows? Now, it's an advantage to be a person of color, actually, because Republican voters like conservative candidates of color because they give the lie to the charge that Republicans are racist. So she has that going for her. And finally, she's a skilled campaigner at the grassroots level of retail politics. And that's important because the first 2 primary or caucus voting states next year, New Hampshire and Iowa, favor that kind of close-on in-person campaigning. And in the latest polling, Nikki Haley is coming in 4th among Republicans behind President Trump, Florida's popular Governor Ron DeSantis, and former Vice President Mike Pence. So that's not too bad. Now, it's a long way from there to winning the Republican Party presidential nomination in 18 months, but never say never.
And what do you think of her stance there? We heard a little bit of it there. Her foreign policy stance. She's seeming pretty hawkish towards China and Russia.
Yes, well, she's trying to be conservative while charting a middle path. In other words, not alienating President Trump and his conservative base, but she's gently criticizing him and also President Biden for being too old. For example, in her launch video, which you played part of, and in her speech the next day on Wednesday before a live enthusiastic audience declaring her candidacy, she said, "We need a new generation of leadership." Now, that's actually nothing new because that same claim worked for Governor Bill Clinton in 1992, but not for California Governor Jerry Brown in 1976. Both of them said they represented a new generation of leadership. And of course, the original new generation of leadership was represented by John F. Kennedy, who was elected president in 1960. But as I noted, Nikki Haley is expected to make a lot out of being a person of color and a woman. But she may have some trouble raising the huge amounts of money that are necessary to mount a lengthy national campaign. And she'll be one of many other candidates, not only President Trump, but there could be a dozen or more other Republicans who are declaring. Now, here's a very interesting possibility. She might actually wind up helping President Trump, who she's running against, because if President Trump is not indicted for the crimes that he is alleged to have committed, he will be the front runner or one of the two leaders in the Republican presidential nomination, Governor DeSantis of Florida being the other one. But Nikki Haley and the others who will likely also run, including former Vice President Mike Pence, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, all of these candidates may split the Republican primary vote, thus leaving former President Trump with the most votes. That's how Donald Trump won the nomination in 2016 against a field of 17 candidates who split the anti-Trump vote as Trump's base remained strong.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that, because that was such a wide field, wasn't it? And the only voice that came through back then was Donald Trump's, because he was still unexpected at that point. You know, people couldn't quite believe their eyes, and then he was president. Do you think that will work out the same way this time around? Are people growing tired of that act yet?
I personally do not think it will work. I mean, predictions, to paraphrase Shakespeare, are odious in American politics, but former President Trump is carrying an awful lot of baggage now, and he used to poll in the 80th or 90th percentile even after he left office among Republicans. Now he's down around 50%. DeSantis is closing in on that, and I don't know. It's anybody's guess. It's going to be a fascinating race, but can I just comment briefly on some of the reaction to Nikki Haley's introduction? Speaking of President Trump, he welcomed her in the race. He said that she should follow her heart, but he's gently critical that she said 2 years ago that she would not run for president in 2024 if Donald Trump did. And of course, he is running. Meanwhile, Trump's Political Action Committee was way harsher, and they said that Haley, quote, is a career politician whose only fulfilled commitment is to herself, end quote. Ouch. A lot of people say that about her, unfortunately. And her 3.5 minute video titled Strong and Proud, Time for a New Generation, it was slick and impressive. I have to hand her that. But her actual live announcement speech the next day, in my opinion, was less so. To me, she can come across as a little bit programmed and lacking charisma. And by the way, I have written the same criticism of former Vice President Mike Pence, who's also planning to run in 2024. So I'm an equal opportunity critic, notwithstanding the sex of the candidate.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, isn't it? Because we're even sort of a year away from the primaries beginning. But fascinating to get your thoughts, Peter.
Can I just make my closing comment here, because this might be the takeaway from this brief interview.
Yeah.
Some people are asking, is Nikki Haley actually aiming to be selected as vice president?
Yeah.
I mean, to run for president, you're raising your profile nationally. She's getting a tremendous amount of attention this first week. And if she does well but does not win, well, perhaps if Donald Trump wins, or Mike Pompeo, or Governor DeSantis, she would bring a lot to balance the ticket. A woman and a woman of color, the first Asian American Republican. So, it's not such a bad job to be vice president. So maybe that's her. In fact, Secretary Pompeo said in his book that Nikki Haley tried to convince President Trump in 2020 that he should dump Vice President Pence and choose her, Nikki Haley, when he was running for re-election in 2020, which of course he lost, but he decided not to do that. But, she may have had her eye on the vice president slot for some time now.
That's an interesting thought. Watch and see what happens there. Thank you very much for your time this morning. That's Peter Chowka, political analyst in the US.
It's 9:31. This is the weekend edition of Good Morning Scotland with Fiona Stalker and Lucy White.